Thank you, Irene. So, just firstly, please excuse the croaky voice. There's a bit of a reverb. Is it supposed to be like that? Can you guys all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's all that matters, really. Well, thank you for the opportunity, Irene, and nice to be with you guys again. Always a joy to connect with SASA and to share with you guys experience and, anything that can help your art careers along. Tonight we are going to be talking about pricing your art. I'll also look at several factors that influence the market value of your art. So I did bring notes along. Unfortunately, I don't have a slideshow for you tonight, but I'm going to kind of roughly just try and follow my notes, and then we'll see how we get along tonight. I need somebody to do a time check though, because you know me, once I get started. Okay, so you'll tell me when it is. How long do I have? It's not there. Oh, okay.
Around about 8 o'clock.
You see, my watch is already 10 minutes behind it. Okay. Alright, good. Tell me when we're getting close. Okay, good. It's a lot of reverb, hey? Maybe that's better. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Alright. Good. Okay, so as Irene has said, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Marc Alexander. I am a full-time artist. I also used to have the studio art gallery, so quite a lot of years in selling art. We represented some prominent artists in Cape Town and South Africa. We've now committed ourselves completely to the Alexander Arts Academy, which is an art school. I've got about 90 students, which I see every week, and I'm helping them along their creative journeys, helping mentor them into their art careers and so on. So I actually teach traditional technique and all of that, as well as encouraging them to participate in the art market and just grow as artists. Okay, so just when we think off the cuff about pricing our art, you can go do a quick Google search and you will see that there are some formulas. You might find one that says, well, work out the square centimeters of your painting, and once you find the square amount, let's say it's a 50 by 40 square centimeter painting, you times the height by the width, come to 2,000, and then you give yourself a rate per square centimeter. So maybe it's R1.50. So at that rate, that painting should sell technically for 3,000 Rand. It kind of falls short a bit. I think that formula really only works in the context of doing a solo exhibition, or where you've got 30 or 40 artworks of varying slight sizes, just to be consistent across the board with your pricing. Maybe in that context it would work, but generally what would happen is that rate that you multiply usually starts on the higher end, and then of course you price yourself out of the market very quickly. Another way is to take your time, your materials, work out how many hours you spent on this thing, and then add your material cost and that type of thing, and then give yourself an hourly rate. Now that of course is very dangerous, because it's very easy to price yourself out of the market. I know from my own experience in 2010, I used to do very large close-up portraits of wildlife, 2 meters by 120 size canvases. And those type of paintings with the amount of detail would take me on average about 2 months to do. I could probably do it, well, I can do it right now in 1 week. So my time has become much quicker as my experience has grown and I've developed my technique and all of that. So you can't really charge the client for an experience. You see, it doesn't help saying, well, this painting took me 400 hours, therefore I'm charging 100,000 Rand or whatever the case would be. It doesn't quite work like that. Okay, but let's move on. We'll see a few other ways. I think a more sensible approach would be to kind of find artists that are more or less at your level, your skill set, maybe some of the subject matter, and because there are so many artists out there today, it shouldn't be too difficult to find somebody that's kind of operating where you're at, and then do a comparative pricing, so you know more or less at that price point. Like I said, yes, thank you, Irene. With my academy, I should stay behind the speaker. Oh, that's the problem. Okay. We do an annual exhibition. I like to tell my students they have an optional choice of putting artwork in. They don't actually. I strongly encourage them to participate. But it's always a thing before the opening of that show. You know, a lot of the students are beginners, total beginners, they've never exhibited before. Is that or something? Oh, is the other mic on? Is that what's okay. Okay, good. So we kind of go through this over and over again. So a lot of the students we've got about 90 students, as I've said, and many of them are beginners. You know, some of them can only afford the 3 hours a week with me to be creative. Others have the luxury of painting all day, every day, with no other responsibilities whatsoever, and kind of the rest will find their places in between that. Some of the students are already established artists, which means they're automatically going to come in at a higher price point. So it is kind of a challenge to say, you know, what is a fair price to ask when a collective like that puts their work together. I normally give them parameters. So I will say the high end should be for a student exhibition. For the past one, I would say, you know, 8,000 Rand for a small painting, 40 by 50 centimeters, more or less. But it cannot be less than, let's say, 4,000 Rand. Now, of course, that needs to include a whole lot of other costs. It's got to be fair to the student. It mustn't end up costing the student money to put the work on the show. There's all kinds of costs, and let's quickly look at some of those. Sorry, just find my page here. Okay, I think I'm actually going to do better without these notes. They're really distracting. Okay, so I would give them parameters, and if they want to, because this often happens, you'll find some students, maybe they've got visions of grandeur, I don't know what the issue is, and they'll suddenly come 30,000 Rand price point. Somebody that's never exhibited before or never had a work on a show before, now suddenly wants to put the artwork out there. So I have a whole little speech, which I'm going to share with you now, that I normally give to these students, just to help them be in tune with reality. So part of pricing your artwork is not just a creative decision. There's got to be integrity attached to it. And what we're really doing as artists, especially if we want to be able to do it full-time, we need to be nurturing and developing the market value of our art consistently and slowly over time. Now, sometimes you might have a lucky break. I had one many years ago. I'll share this experience with you. So my second solo exhibition, my lovely wife Lindy, as some of you know, managed to get me into a gallery in Sandton in Johannesburg. And it was kind of a high-end market and so on. But I used to do, as some of you might know, very large portraits of Nelson Mandela and that type of thing. And she managed to get one into this gallery. And I had just sold one at another gallery for about 30,000 Rand. And Lindy communicated to this gallery that this painting should be on at retail 30,000 Rand. So I thought, no. It needs to be lifted a little bit. So I went and saw the gallery curator person, and I said, I think it would be better if you made it 35, retail. So that was the Friday. On Monday, I got a call from the gallery, and they said, oh, congratulations, they just sold the painting. So I said, oh, good. So she asked me, where's the banking details? She wants to now do the transfer of the money, which doesn't always happen like that. That's good old days. Anyway, and I then understood from her that she actually sold the painting for 70,000 Rand, thinking I wanted 35,000 as my artist price, and the gallery commission is, the 100% markup, so 50% goes to the gallery and 50% goes to the artist. That was a lucky break, because that gallery then kind of bumped all my art, basically doubling the pricing. It was also one of the few galleries that had taken my portraits at the time. It was just being at the right place, right time, and they sold several paintings at that new price point, to my delight, of course. Anyway, I did my second solo exhibition at that gallery, and I also learned a valuable lesson there. I worked for an entire year making all this work, not getting an income from anywhere else. I had to save the paintings up, doing a solo show has a huge cost involved. And just putting on a spread in Sandton cost me a lot. I had to beg, borrow, and steal money to make it, all come together. And anyway, all the paintings, there was not one artwork under 65,000 Rand. So the show was on for 3 weeks at that gallery, and I did not sell a single artwork. It's very hard to recover from that kind of. Anyway, subsequently I've sold all of them since then. But I'm going to talk just now just about making art available at any and every price point when you do a show like that, or even just generally. Because I had a lot of friends and people that wanted to support me. There was a huge crowd at the opening, but that price point was just out of most people's reach. So anyway, okay, so just, as we start thinking about pricing our work, the key thing I think is consistency. And as you go, you're going to slowly find out what the market really is willing to pay for your work. You can't push it too high too quickly, because, it's like shooting yourself in the foot. If it's too high too quickly, people just are not going to buy that artwork. It's too expensive. Also, keep in mind there's a lot of other factors happening. COVID, all kinds of things that affect the art market generally, and the way people spend, something can happen in the world that suddenly everybody stops buying luxury items, and of course art is a luxury item. Okay, so several factors that would contribute to the value of your art. Of course, the medium you work in is important. I could have worked in any medium. I teach watercolor, drawing, painting, oil, acrylic. I can work in any of the mediums, but I had 4 children who went to school and they don't stop eating ever. So I thought, let me look at price points for the different mediums and how they sell. Watercolor is a fantastic medium, not very easy, but isn't really appreciated as much in South Africa. If you're sitting in the UK, maybe it's a different story. There's a different appreciation for watercolor there. Drawings, not so easy. There are a few artists, if you think of artists like Bashir, who can get 150,000 Rand for a pencil sketch. It can be done, but it's not easy. Charcoal, very expressive. You could probably get more for charcoal than for graphite because of the expressive nature of the charcoal. but oil paintings kind of do seem to take the higher prices generally. There is an exception. Of course, today acrylic paint has improved phenomenally. So you've got golden acrylics and Liquitex bringing out all these amazing acrylic paints, which sometimes cost more than the artist quality oil paints. But it's not often. As soon as people read acrylic paint, there's kind of a sentimental trigger with oil on canvas. If they read acrylic, somehow they just feel, oh, there's got to be less. Now, of course, Andrew Cooper, our local Cantonian artist, has kind of changed that a bit. Andrew obviously reaches in excess of 100,000 for acrylic paintings. I don't know necessarily if he did them in oil, if he would get more for them. I don't believe that might be the case. But certainly, he's also broken that kind of idea that, you know, acrylic painting should always be less than oil painting. But let's be honest, there is a sentiment with oil on canvas. It's kind of lasted the test of time, and, you know, people just have it in their minds that somehow it should maybe be worth more, I don't know. And then, of course, we might also think about size. So it is true that larger paintings obviously sell for more, but it's not always the case that a larger painting is more work than smaller paintings. So you may also know that I've got a little bit of background in art reproduction. So I get commissioned by high-end clients all over the world to do reproductions of particularly Gustav Klimt's work. Now the Kiss is 1.8 by 1.8 meters, quite a large painting. That literally takes me 350 to 400 hours to reproduce that. That's just because it's a very mechanical process. I've got to literally imitate the strokes and everything. That's what takes so long. It's obviously Klimt wouldn't have taken so long because he just went ahead and did it. Now the Kiss I've reproduced for different clients all over the world 8 times. When a client says to me, oh, that's very expensive for reproduction, then I say, well, you know what you're getting. I put out a YouTube video of the first one I did, and just that one video got me the other 7 jobs. YouTube sometimes does a good thing. But especially if the client is foreign, I do get them to pay the full amount up front. I don't start with a 50% deposit. I will with other commissions, but if they know what they're getting, they need to pay the whole amount up front. So I know it's paid, and then of course I'm very motivated to get that painting finished. Anyway, if the client says, can't you make the price less and make the painting smaller? I say no, because now the details got to be finer. You see, so it doesn't always work that smaller or bigger can change the price. It's generally the same work, and if you're doing a reproduction in a smaller scale, it's actually more work and finer detail. So I then sometimes say, no, that's actually going to cost you extra. I immediately put them off that idea. Anyway, okay, so when it comes to pricing your own artwork, size, medium, I suppose your art journey will have a lot to do with it as well. Winning awards, you know, developing a career, participating in exhibitions, having a track record of participation and sales, all of that is going to contribute towards the market value of the work. It's very seldom that you just, well, anything's possible these days, but you know, that you'll just get an artist out of the blue that is exceptional, no track record, and then can suddenly put their artwork at a price record. Usually, it's a long journey, and it's nurturing and developing that market value to get to the point where, you know, some people say, wow, look what they're charging. Anyway, okay, I'm not saying people don't take chances, but very often, you know, there's a misconception as well about just pricing the art high, that, well, because it's expensive, everybody's just going to think it's brilliant. Some of my students have that idea. Anyway, Of course, that's not the case. If it's generally a student exhibition, people expect it to be kind of more or less similar pricing. We don't call it a student exhibition, of course. We call it an artist exhibition. I don't use the word student because that can also trigger the mind of the client. So wherever we do the show, we never use that word. We just say a collective of artists or whatever, a community of artists, actually what we use. Anyway, consistency kind of will help you. And a lot of artists, they really work against themselves in this area. Now, sometimes we got to understand, being an artist is not easy. And if you're the breadwinner or the family is dependent on that income, you can have downs where you haven't sold anything in 6 months. And now suddenly everything is a crisis and you've got to think about it. So I would just say, what we want to avoid is just a public perception that you are highly flexible with your market value. So if you say the artwork is 10,000 Rand, it's got to be consistently 10,000 Rand everywhere. So if people saw it on your website, it should be at 10,000 Rand. If they see it on a gallery's website, it should be 10,000 Rand. If the client phones you and says, oh, I saw your work in that gallery, how might I just buy it from you directly for 8,000 Rand? Beware, very often that could be the gallery setting you up, giving you a little test to see. You see, that is the demise of galleries these days, the fact that we have the internet and artists are directly approachable by the public. At the Studio Art Gallery, I had people, when I wanted to help them, and I'm a really helpful kind of guy, they would say, let me stop you just there. I never deal with galleries, I only work directly with the artist. And then they'd proceed to photograph the label of the artwork they're interested, and even in the gallery, they'll Google the artist, and by the time they're walking up, they're already speaking to the artist online. Now, we all live in this world, and we've got to all survive, so galleries understand this happens a lot. But if the artist then came in the next day and said to me, I don't care what the reason is, they're taking that artwork. So usually when we take artwork on consignment, it's for a specified duration. If the artist, for any reason, unless it's really a legitimate reason, cuts that duration short, the gallery will blacklist you. They won't tell you to your face, but you're done. They won't work with you again. Because you see, you've undercut the gallery. It's a very, very unethical thing to do. It happens all the time. So I've got quite a blacklist. Excuse me. Anyway, it's not great to do that because, look, okay, so firstly, it's diminishing the value of your work. I'm not saying that you can't negotiate your price, especially if you're desperate. I would just say be very careful how you go about it, and certainly don't negotiate prices on works that are actually in a gallery somewhere. If you negotiate the price, do it privately and help that client understand that they need to be discreet about that. And if you do it, still issue them a certificate with the actual value of that artwork. Because you've given them a massive discount there. And help them understand by them making that public in any way, they are going to damage the market value of your art. So try and avoid it. Of course, we're humans, so we can't always avoid it. There are situations where you just got to take the deal. But not if they've seen the artwork in the gallery. If you got the artwork on your own website or wherever. Also, it's important that if you do have your own website, very easy way to sell the artwork directly. What a lot of artists don't realize is that there's actually quite a cost to selling art. I'm sure you guys will realize that. But you've always got to think about it like this. There's a cost of production, your time, your materials, submission fees, delivery fees, insurances, the list goes on and on and on. But the cost of selling the art is something that we really have to consider. And we mustn't count it as a loss of finances. We should see it as a business expense and think of it in a professional way. So galleries can obviously offer us, especially if we're not inclined to self-promote and market ourselves. And a lot of artists do struggle with that. Some, of course, are very good at it. But for the most part, we do need a little bit of help here and there. And galleries, certainly, curated spaces, can give your work credibility, like nothing else. So I would say we should have a positive attitude towards the galleries that we work with. Of course, I say this now because I've had my own gallery. Prior to that, I started my own gallery because of all the trouble, not so much with the galleries I've worked with in the past years, not so much because they weren't really doing what they were supposed to do, but when it came to paying and letting me know that they sold the work, and not all of them, but some of them, I really struggled. And in fact, some of them, especially those in Johannesburg, it was a huge loss and cost to me. Works that they sold and just never let me know. And till today, I still haven't been paid for that. So it kind of does leave, but remember, it's also your responsibility as the artist, not just to waltz in there and say, "Here I am, please just take my stuff." Sometimes we are beholden to the galleries, and so we feel, we can't ask for a contract or a consignment note or anything like that. Whatever they say goes. And we don't want to irritate them by phoning them every second week to hear if they've sold the artwork. If you put your work out, and Cape Town has got a lot of gallery space. There's a lot of place to exhibit all over, so you can put your work in Franschhoek and Hermanus and everywhere. But if you spread yourself out too far, and you don't really have a good arrangement with those galleries, how often are you going to get there to check if that artwork is sold or not? And if you get there and suddenly realize the artwork isn't there, oh, it was sold a few months ago, nobody's told you, you haven't been paid, that happens quite a lot. So I'm just saying, it's all part of you sorting all of that out. I don't want to speak too much about galleries throughout, but let me just say this. If you do put your work online, which is a sensible thing to do, and you've got your own website, very sensible to do that, the client can contact you obviously directly and purchase the artwork directly. You've already worked the sales cost into that artwork. And if you're doing the website yourself, that's where that money is going. That time that you spent putting that website together or doing whatever marketing you did, that's paid for that. If the gallery sells the artwork for you on your behalf, they obviously take a sales commission, and in South Africa, 30 to 50% is very reasonable. The more high-end galleries, that's 50% of the retail price. It's not uncommon, it's very common, that is what it is. I have to always remind some of our artists that galleries are not charity organizations. They're businesses that need to survive on the sale and the sales commission of the art. Now, the gallery can provide you access to clients that you could never get yourself. It's a visibility that, people see the art, at least it's out there. They do their own marketing and their own events where people come and pass through, they're going to see your work there as well. So there's a lot of benefits to having it. It's a curated space, generally. Depends on which galleries you go to, but generally, it should be a curated space, and that curated space, because of the curation that's happened there, it's given your work a fair amount of credibility. It's also positioned your work close proximity to other established artists, maybe, which also gives your work credibility. So there's a lot of benefits to working with a gallery. And of course, it's not just galleries, there are tons of group shows. SASA does a lot of exhibitions, there's a lot of places to put your work out there. So let me just say, if you do, you always got to consider the cost of sale, which could include submission fees and whatever it costs, framing, hanging systems, all that kind of stuff to get that artwork exhibition ready. Those are the costs of selling that work. And it's business expenses. We've got to be mindful of that. If you do manage to get it on a show through an art society like this or an exhibition, don't begrudge the commission, because it's a huge amount of effort to get that to work properly, to be a success at the end of the day. And of course, we want the galleries and the associations to continue giving us more opportunities next year. Anyway, so that's why I say, often, especially to my students, I just got to remind them there is a cost in selling. Somebody's got to do all the work at the end of the day, and it's not a charity. Anyway, okay, so besides working with galleries, also remember that if you have put your work on various online platforms, Saatchi, Fine Arts America, the list is endless. I once Googled how many there are literally thousands of platforms, especially today, that you can put your work on. It's your responsibility to maintain the price points of your artwork. Oh, this is a dangerous one. This is the quickest way to destroy your credibility and your market value of your art. If you put the work on an art platform and forget about it for 10 years, but you still have that artwork, this has happened to one of my students recently, then managed to get into a prestigious gallery in Cape Town in the city, and the client sees the work in the gallery, Googles your name, it suddenly pops up another platform with that same artwork at a fraction of the price. You know what that client does? Doesn't contact the artist, contacts the gallery, speaks to the owner. How impressed do you think that owner's going to be? Yeah, that will be the end of that relationship. So it's quite a thing, so be careful when you just start putting your art out everywhere, because you've got to maintain those prices. For our students, for our annual exhibition, we do an online catalogue. And even though we've now done it 5 years, people are still buying art from 5 years ago. All the marketing that we do for next year's show still triggers sales for the previous years. But let one of those students just tell me they painted over that artwork, or the dog ate it, or they threw it in the trash, or they sold it long and just forgot to tell me. Yeah, I won't be impressed. You see, it's their responsibility to keep me up to date. If anything happens to that artwork, it's their property, not my property, but it's no longer available for sale. The client in the UK doesn't know that. The miracle that the client found that site, found that painting, and actually paid online for it. I don't like giving money back. If the student tells me that work is not available, I've got to then go through a whole rigmarole of reversing those funds. I don't like doing that. So I encourage the students to be diligent about that, and just to be aware that wherever they put that money out there, it's important to keep in mind. Okay, great. All right, that's enough. Let me see what else do I have to talk about. Yeah. So, okay, so marketing, of course, we're not going to do a whole thing on marketing tonight, but of course, a bit of marketing, putting yourself out there will increase the value of your art. If you're in complete isolation and nobody knows of you, how are the clients going to find you? If you do put yourself out there, it's obviously going to be more likely that somebody's going to stumble upon your masterpiece and purchase it. Let me just also say that a lot of galleries, if they're very prominent, established galleries, what you'll find is that the way that they kind of box an artist, if you just appear there, just don't go there without an appointment. But if you do finally stand in front of the gallery owner or curator or whoever's making the decisions, what they really want to know is, have you had a solo exhibition? A lot of galleries will create this huge divide between artists who have had a solo exhibition. By solo exhibition, I mean you're the only artist exhibiting 30, 40 artworks, same theme, not random stuff from a trick and So it's one body of work, a collective body of work with the same people. If you don't, what a lot of galleries, and this is just the way it is, they will kind of categorize you as hobbyist, not really serious. You know, yeah, today, gone tomorrow. Galleries are looking for long-term investments, artists that they can work with, artists who have worked out a process. Also, remember, galleries, you know, we don't like to be branded as artists because we're very rebellious, but branding is good marketing. You know, if I took an artwork to a gallery and they actually hung it on the wall, when they sell that and they contact me and they actually ask me to bring another piece, I dare not walk in there with something totally randomly different. They won't like it. So remember, the gallery, from their perspective, they have a market to cover. They'll include your art because they think it's covering a portion of the market that they don't have covered by the other artists there. And they want to be sure that when you bring stuff, it's going to fill that gap. You know, that they can keep selling more of the same, if you like. And I'm not saying it's going to be exactly the same, of course you understand what I'm saying, but it must not be totally random. It's got to be consistent. If you are the type of artist that like to experiment or whatever, I would say on your website, work in series. So you constantly contribute artwork to the series. And then you got that series, body of work, and maybe a different body of work. That is acceptable because the gallery won't want everything. They'll want, you know, that type of artwork. And you know that's what you give them. Okay, good. Okay, I'm still talking about galleries. Let's quickly just switch. Now, visibility also is a good way to develop your market value. Like I said, and there's very many ways we can do it. Of course, winning the Portrait Award is a good way. Getting into those catalogs, all of that gives you huge credibility. So I would say, you know, anybody that wants to be an artist, participation is absolutely key. And it's hard for us because, you know, and deadlines, of course. But some of us do thrive under pressure. So, yeah, unrealistic deadlines, that's me. But nevertheless, so building up a repertoire, participating, you know, keeping a good record of where you've exhibited, which group shows you've been part of, all of that helps. It will kind of escalate over time and it will help you develop as an artist. Also, the more you exhibit, the more you actually get your work out there in the public domain. That's all the experience you need to start building that value. It's going to be consistent. So you'll only know really when you start selling a string of artworks at certain price points. Once the demand exceeds the supply, that's generally when we up the pricing. So now, let's say you start with one gallery, they sell one work maybe every 2 months, suddenly they're selling a work a month, and now suddenly you can't keep up with the demand because now you've got another gallery and you've joined SASA. So then you might up your pricing slightly, just to slow down the sales a little bit. It might not slow down the sales, but you can see how that works. So if the demand becomes a lot, and that means that your work is actually selling at that certain price point, then you push the pricing up. Also, remember, galleries with their experience in selling art, like that gallery in Johannesburg, they got a feel for it. You know, they could see, oh, that should be 70,000 Rand, not 35. And they were right. That price, 2 days later or a day later, somebody bought it at that price point. So, that's a concept like that, but anyway. But it's good to always get a feel from them, you know, like what they would suggest as a price point, especially if you've got a relationship with the gallery. You can just ask them honestly, do you think my art is too expensive or too cheap? I know many local artists who are asking way too little for their work. You see, they don't value it themselves. So they've kept it at the same price point for like the last 2 decades. They need to be upping it. And of course they can't keep up with the demand because it sells very quickly. But it's nice to have that as constant sell. Maybe that's why they're doing it. I don't know. Okay, Good. So I just quickly want to talk about ways that you can get yourself out there, but let me just quickly mention, we'll look at some South African examples now in a second in terms of this, but galleries are looking for consistency, and they want to know if they sell work that you can replace it, and that you're going to replace more of the same, and so on. But there is this term that's been floating around called blue chip artist. Have any of you heard of that? Oh, okay, it's got to do with the stock market, I think. I think that's where the term comes from, the blue chip stock, which refers to companies which are very stable. They've got a very good possibility on return on investment. And if you look into that, I would say that if you want to be an artist seriously, read up on how to become a blue chip artist. Now, normally, most blue chip artists have passed away, and that's what makes blue chip artists. But there are, because now there is really a limit to the amount of paintings they can make. But there are many living artists, and a case in point would be our Andrew Cooper. We once did a solo exhibition for Andrew Cooper at the Studio Art Gallery, and his speaker during the opening was actually his attorney. And I thought, wow, that's really unusual. Why would you get your attorney to do the opening speech of your exhibition? But then I realized what the relationship was. So Andrew Cooper, over the last 15 years, you'll see his artwork progress very steadily from 20, 30,000 rand a painting to 150, 180,000 rand a painting. And the way he did that was by keeping this kind of blue chip concept in his mind. So his attorney held him accountable with his stock of original artwork, which they escalated at a certain percentage annually. You see, and once investors and people with money saw this, that this artwork is growing in value and it's recorded annually. 10 years' time, this thing is going to be, I'm just putting that out there, it's a very good idea. But you've got to be very consistent, there's ways to document that, and of course, he and his attorney, I don't know, after COVID, if that is still the case, because we all had to make adjustments since COVID, but anyway, certainly a good idea to think that my art could potentially become an investment to somebody in the future if I'm careful about my market value and I look after it. And if I can record in some way that these artworks are escalating annually by whatever percentage it might be. Okay, that's just an idea. Okay, good. Now, just putting yourself out there in terms of visibility, of course, there's all the online things that we can do, but one of the key things, just in terms of your fine art, is multiplying yourself. So, of course, we are only human. Even with all the technology today, we can still only do so much. And but sometimes, if we just think slightly differently about things, we can do so much and have money to spare. It's not always about the money, but it's always about the money. Anyway, let me just say this. So I'm talking about reproductions and prints of your own work. Now, you guys know I'm very pro reproducing your work, and I've learned a great deal. There are many international artists who have actually excelled and become much more famous because they were very open to the idea of mass producing their work. I suppose you can call it commercialization, which of course as an artist, we don't want to hear that. But let's be real, I would rather sell prints and be able to do what I love than stop art altogether and go find a job that I might not enjoy as much. You guys see where I'm going with this. Anyway, so it's become much easier. We've got some great examples. If you think of Damien Hirst, Banksy, Shepard Fairey, these are international artists whose careers have been boosted, they become world famous because they embraced the idea of producing their work in print form on a much larger scale. So I'm talking about giclée prints or digital prints. It does mean that you've got to have a good quality image of the art, so you've got to have it professionally photographed or scanned in, and then to produce the art on archival papers so that they last, with archival inks that have got about a 200-year guarantee on color fastness and fade resistance, that type of thing. So it also becomes something, you see, when I did that show in Santon, I wish I had prints available for my friends and family to support me with. After that, every show, I started putting up prints, and that's kind of, you know, made everything okay, because now everybody can support me if they want to. It gives a wonderful opportunity for people who want to support you or would like something of your creative expression, but can only afford a certain amount. So, you know, good business is to provide a product for the high end, which is those affluent few who can afford it, but also something for the masses. You've got to make yourself accessible so that people can get your work at every and any price point. Now, this is quite important, and of course, some might be thinking, oh, print stock or print runs and editions, doesn't that devalue the value of the original artwork? Because what we do is we create an original art painting or drawing or scratchboard or whatever medium we're working in, we take it to the photographer, they get a very high-res image from that, and then they start print runs on canvas or archival papers or whatever the case may be, and they sold it at a different price point. Does print runs devalue the original? Well, some people might think yes, but actually the opposite is true. The more you put yourself out there, it goes without saying, the more people will recognize, and in fact, it has the opposite effect on the original artwork. And we've seen this over time. If you think of famous artists like The Kiss by Gustav Klimt is the most reproduced artwork. I don't know who works on statistics, some American, I'm sure. But anyway, in the world. But because of that, they will also say it's the most famous artwork in the world. And it's reproduced on t-shirts, bags, mugs, you name it. Same with Starry Night from Van Gogh and the Mona Lisa. It creates a consciousness of who you are as an artist and your creative everywhere. So it is kind of putting yourself out there in a way. So I would say if you had a negative perception of print runs or editions, the trick comes obviously that there's got to be integrity attached to those prints. So for example, if you do say the edition is so many, that you stick to that, because being caught out there could be very bad for you. Now keep in mind that digital prints are very different from etchings or silk screens or that type of reproduction. A digital print, number one and number 10 gazillion, million look identical. It's not like an etching that starts wearing down after, the plate starts wearing down after 80 prints. So if you've got a high-res image, make sure that your edition is not too limited. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose. So I try to explain this to several artists, tempted to mention their names, but anyway, who take digital prints and then they make only 25 available. Somehow thinking that the clients are going to pay more because there's only 25. Let me tell you, the client won't pay more. They know a digital print that size should be somewhere between, let's say it's A3, 1,000 to 3,000 Rand. You can't suddenly go charge 13,000 Rand just because there's only 25. That is a total misconception. Somebody can afford or pay 13,000 Rand for a digital print because there's only 25 of them. Might as well buy the original artwork. You guys see what I'm saying? So I started making, and I saw this also thanks to Bowen Bashir, because you know he did those beautiful pencil sketches, and I was in Johannesburg in Hyde Park, there's a gallery there, and I saw Bowen Bashir print of a rhino with a baobab tree. You know those? Yeah. And I saw that it was 500. It was out of an edition of 500, and it was like 200 and something like that. And I just did a calculation in my mind, and I realized, he's probably sold the original for about 100K. And if he manages to sell this run of 500 prints, he's made 2.7 million. And the gallery, that takes 50%, has made that much. So the real equity of our art, when we're talking about pricing and finding market value, often is not in the actual original painting. It's in what we can do with that image. I've often spoken about this. If you go onto Fine Art America or Redbubble in Australia or any of those, you'll see that people are willing to pay for copyright to use your image on certain things. I know an artist who sold the copyright of one artwork for $1 million for an ad campaign in the States, because they had it on the right platform and it was exactly what they needed. He still has the original artwork. You guys know, we're not going to talk about copyright tonight, but the copyright of the artwork always belongs to you as the artist, even if anybody buys it. They may not put it on Facebook or print it on a book, even though they might have paid $100,000 for that painting. It's only when there's a legal document that you have given them rights that they may put that into any kind of reproduction, print form, or whatever. Did you guys know that? Okay, so anyway, the equity of our art, you see in a print run, you can work it out and see, where the value lies, and also by doing that, you create passive income. So, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Donna McKenna. She's spoken here before. Lovely artist. Donna, we actually transitioned the studio art gallery from Donna McKenna, who started it in Cork Bay many years ago. But anyway, Donna wants my wife to go over the running of the gallery. We sold, on average, 20 to 30,000 rand a month prints on the McKellar. That's like a good trickle. Andrew Cooper as well. Sometimes people would just buy a stack of them, and I'm thinking, actually, $2.5 grand a pop, and they're like small, gifts for the kids, whatever. So that's what I'm saying. Sometimes it can definitely bring in that passive income, especially if you want to be an artist in a full-time capacity. You've got to be open to the idea of multiplying yourself in this way. The print stock and making your work accessible tends to make the original more sought after and valuable. So if we look at some other South African examples, for example, think about our favorite Vladimir Trechikov. He did what no one else wanted to do, mass production. Oh, so kitsch. No museums wanted his art. I worked at the art museum, sorry. And a very negative attitude. But that idea that he had got him a beautiful home, Bishop's Court, wherever. And he was able to support his family in a good way. And often when I watch anything that's not anything and everything, but often things that are shot in the UK, you'll see, oh, there's the Blue Girl of Trechikov in the background. It's world famous, that artwork, because he put it out there. So what I'm saying is not all his artwork is as popular as that one, but how do you know which one is going to be popular unless you start putting it out there and see what is it that everybody's buying? The other artist who's done exceptionally well is Porci. That guy, say what you want, he's got an incredible business sense. He's found a market, and he's licensed out the rights to those paintings that he does, 5 a day, 900 in a year. That's what he told me once. I don't know if it's true. But you will find it on trays and fabric and mugs and anything under the sun. I mean, he's gone quite wild with it. But beautiful home in Stellenbosch. Lives quite a good life, I think, through the print stock and the occasional sale of the originals. His originals, by the way, are very expensive. So you would think that, that really pushing the the reproduction or the commercialization side of your work will diminish the original value. It doesn't. It actually makes it more. Okay. Is this a sign? Alright, I'm on page 2. Alright, let me just quickly see, have I gone through it? Okay, yeah, I think that's alright. Okay, yeah, there we go, already mentioned that. Okay, let me just quickly say in closing, because then we'll take a few questions. I always tell my community of artists that, when we put our art out there, whether it's on a show or a competition or whatever, and you're thinking about the pricing, if any of you submitted work to the SASA with signatures, which is Victoria Art Museum, and you went to the crypt, one of the key issues that they brought up was pricing the artwork. If they felt your art was overpriced, immediately it was out. And then they tried to explain emerging artists asking for a lot of money for whatever they're doing, which seemed unreasonable to those judges. Anyway, so that was a criteria in the competition. Just keep that in mind. Portrait award, don't overprice those work. I would rather caution on bringing it down slightly, because remember, anyway, you want to maintain market value, but don't push it too much, because they're just going to see the price. They're not going to know who you are, unless the judges have common sense. They should know who the established artists are in the country. Anyway, let's move on from that. What did I want to say now? I'm feeling the pressure here. So it's got to be fair. The pricing's got to be fair. It's not just about the intrinsic value, it's also about fairness to you. There's nothing worse than a gallery telling you, you've sold the piece, congratulations, and they pay the money over, but you feel the resentment in your heart because somehow you just feel you've lost. Yeah, this wasn't fair to me. It's got to be fair to you and reasonable. Like I said, you can't charge the client for inexperience. So it's got to be, understand where you are in your journey, in your development, and your skill set, and all of that, and charge the client then accordingly. The client just sees the end price, but it's got to be fair to them. You guys understand what I'm saying? It's got to be reasonable. So compare yourself with other artists kind of on your level. That's not always easy to find, but these days with the internet, it's not that hard. You've just got to do a bit of effort. And then it's got to be justifiable. You've got to, if you're putting your art at a high sales point, I don't mind students coming to me and saying they want 50,000 Rand for their entry to our annual exhibition. But the very next thing I'm going to tell them is, okay, I'm just going to search your name quickly because I should see other sales or other artwork on the internet somewhere at that price point that you're asking for. If I don't, galleries do it as well. Whenever I've seen a new artist that's come to me, the first thing I do when that artist leaves, what do you think I do? I go check on the internet. Is that price point that they've told me, is it realistic? Or are they taking a fat chance here? You see, you have to, it's just good business to do that. I mean, you can't just take people's word at whatever, you take people's word, but you still got to go check. So if it's justifiable, meaning you've sold a lot of art on the internet, a lot of galleries that sell work, they don't take the work off, they'll just mark it as sold, but you can see how much that work is sold for if you start getting to that point. So you've got to do maybe a search of your name and see, is there this consistency out there? If there's not, I would do everything I can to fix that, because that's going to be a struggle for you into the future. There's got to be integrity in your pricing and consistency in your pricing, which means wherever the clients are seeing it, wherever the gallery is seeing it, if they're investigating whether your sales history is correct or not, it's got to be consistent. Your own websites could be your worst enemy. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so just as an encouragement, go and check it out. I'll just quickly leave you with 2 quotes. Got them written here. So Corey Huff, he's a blogger. He's written a book on how to sell your art online. Quite useful if you want to go read it. He says, if you want to make a living as an artist, which of course I assume most of you do, You need to treat your art like a business. Okay, it goes without saying often, artists don't want to hear that, but anyway. That means creating work at different price points, so people at various income levels can become collectors of your work. Another quote from Austin Clune, who wrote Steal Like an Artist, also another book I'd recommend. He said, don't be afraid to sell out. And I'll tell you now what he means by that. Sell out and then make something even better. So what he means, he often discusses how artists should not feel guilty about earning income from different streams, prints, merchandise, digital media, as long as they stay true to themselves and authentic to their original vision. Don't lose that. But money does matter at the end of the day, and it will help us create even more amazing art as we go. Good. Any questions?
There you go.
Is this mine? There we go.
I just want to find out, with prints, do you have a recommended size, like A4, or what have you seen works best?
Yeah, that's a good question. For us, I have two sizes. I've got actually, I have a small, medium, and large, but we don't really print the medium size. It's either the small or the large that people tend to buy. So the small is 25 centimeters on the short end, watercolor, whatever. I mean, of course, you can go smaller. It also depends where you're placing it. So if I was taking a set of 12 watercolors to Cape Point, I might make them smaller. You know, you've got to think about that. But generally, a print about this size that easily can fit into a suitcase, you know. I would also say it's got to be packaged nicely, acetate. Don't use those machines that seal wrap the plastic. It comes loose, looks terrible after a month. Usually the prints could lie in a gallery for a year before somebody buys it. You want to get a nice firm acetate, not too thick, but just to keep it fresh. So even after a year, when a client comes and they see it for the first time, it still looks brand new. We use foam core to back the print. So I'm talking about prints on paper. We use only 300 gram. Most galleries will only take 300 gram prints, because less than that, the client will buy it, go frame it, and then it warps. And then they come back to the gallery and now they've got a big issue. So all my students, which I train them how to do this, have their prints made on 300 gram Hahnemuller. You can choose the whiteness of the paper or the texture of the paper. Watercolor papers are also nice to print on. But then you back it with foam core, 3 or 5 millimeters, and you put acetate, stick it nicely so that you don't see it. And in the back, you can put your own details, your name, contact details if you want, website. The gallery will, most galleries will want it to be archival, so it's got to be done with 150 to 200 years on that ink. The guarantee has to be there. So you can put that guarantee in the back of your print already. Look at Andrew Cooper's work, go to wherever he's got his artwork, and then just see what he's done. Craig Ivel also does it. You can see puts a nice, the certificate of authenticity is actually in the back of the print. But it says the archival paper, the ink is fade resistant and color fade proof for 200 years or whatever. So that size, the bigger sizes, but look on your website, you can give various size options. Remember, a high-res image is often not, it's not a good idea to take an artwork this size and blow it up. It's much better to take an artwork this size and reduce the size. It starts looking a bit weird when you start, it depends on how you've made it. But anyway, watercolor actually sometimes works enlarging it, but oil paintings and acrylic, I mean, it's up to you. You can see what it looks like when it's printed. And we normally, I tell them to print a 3 centimeter border, and then they can sign it. Now let me just say, the only reason why I edition the prints, like 1 out of 500 to 500 out of 500, is so that I can keep track of it. If I didn't have that issue, I would have done open edition prints, much easier. You don't have to write numbers, keep track of the numbers or whatever. But then when you start spreading it out, you don't know where what is, and you lose track of your stock. That's the problem. So it's nice when you know number 21 out of 500 is in Hermanus, at that gallery there. Number 22 is in France. So you see, once you start spreading those prints out, it's good to keep track of those edition numbers. I would say 500, make it 5,000. No client has ever, of all the many prints we've sold, check prints, inquired about the edition number or complained about it. Or sometimes they want number 1 out of 500. I tell them, sorry, I'm keeping those for my children's inheritance. But no, it's obviously sold. But you know, they can't really choose the number, they just gotta get it in. But no client has ever. The only people who complain about it, oh, why is this edition so big? Oh, other artists. Because their editions only had 25 in it. And now they say, well, this was a 500. You see how lucrative that is and how that is a mistake. Serious mistake. Anyway, open editions are fine. But for the sake of keeping track where those things. So an open edition means there's no number. It's limitless. Clients won't mind. But for the sake of you keeping track of where your stuff is, it's better to edition them. Sorry, I don't know if I actually answered your question.
Size.
Alright, size. Okay. Yeah, sorry. So 25 on the short side and whatever the long side is with the 3 centimeter white border so that you can sign it in the white border. I also remove the signature so the printer will clone the signature out and then I write the signature in with a pencil. So it adds value to the print if you've signed it with a pencil. We see that with Trechikov's works. If it's signed with a pencil, you will pay 8,000 Rand for a very faded print of the Blue Girl if it's got a signature on. If it doesn't have a signed signature and it's got a printed signature, it's about 2,000 or 3,000 Rand for that same thing. Anyway. Any questions? Yes?
So I just wanted to know what's your recommendation for the amount of print?
You mean how big to make the edition?
Yes.
I would probably say not less than 500, but it's up to you. You know, if it was a silk screen or an etching, something that's going to deteriorate as you print, keep it small. That's why people kept it small back then. But we're in a digital age. Why you're selling internationally? What if somebody in China discovers your print and now suddenly they want 10,000? You see, I would say make it 5,000 or 50,000. It's not going to matter really to the client who buys it. They just want something of yours that they can look at and enjoy. Yeah, so I would say don't worry about the edition of digital prints because the first and last one, however big the edition, but if we understand that that's going to give you more exposure, make your work more accessible to much more people, why limit it to 25 or 50 or 80? That makes no sense. But if you want to do that, by all means, be free. I would just say, if you say 80, you then stick with 80. Otherwise, you'll have all kinds of other problems on your hands. Then you start losing integrity or trust with galleries, and if suddenly they see, oh, there's 50 out of 50 or whatever.
Mark, I just want to know, does that mean that you have to print the 500 at once?
No.
So
Yeah.
you can print
As
in
you
batches?
do. Absolutely. So the idea is that whoever photographs your work, so I would recommend Thomas Nihal in Houtbeek, very good. Stephen Gibson in Constantiaberg, or Brenton Cara in Fishhook. I work with them. I've worked with all of them at any time, but the person who photographs the artwork should be the person who prints it. If you take a file, a photograph from one photographer to another printer, they can't really calibrate that printer to print those colors like the original. The photographer must be the printer. That's the only advice I'd give you. So whoever photographs the art, they can calibrate their machine to match those colors perfectly. In fact, Brent and Cara, when they do my prints, they put a test strip on the painting. So when I go fetch that original, I look at it. If I can see the test strip, I tell them fix it. those colours aren't right. But that test strip is so accurately matched to the colours of the painting, I can't see that it's there. I can hardly, well, I can see it's a piece of cardboard lying there, but I can hardly see because the colours are perfect. So then I know they keep it on their system, and in 10 years' time, I see I'm running low on stocks, all the galleries have sold all that, and I want to print that one again. I just send them an email, please print that image of that artwork, that size, do it like that, and they know. So they've got like a whole bank of all my images, and if I needed something, I just ask them, but I don't print the whole lot. That's very expensive, and yeah, be careful if you can't store that and that gets damaged, it's going to cost you a lot. So the prints are expensive, so they're not cheap. But, I mean, you can, they certainly are, you know, so a paper print sells for 2,500 or 1,800, costs you maybe 300-400 rand to make. So, okay, the photograph is more. The photograph can be 300 to 500 rand, but that's a once-off. And then you just print as you go. Unless you've got your own Photoshop and cameras or whatever, you can do it yourself, then all good.
What about the place of Orms?
Orms can do it for you, yeah.
They scan it in?
They can do it. I would just, Orms is very commercial. They've got lots of clients. If I was working with Orms, I would make sure that I get a high-res image from them. I don't just think, and that's really the same with Stephen and the others. Anything can happen to their system. Somebody can walk in and steal the PC. I don't know if they are. They probably are saying cloud somewhere, sorry. But, you know, make sure that every now and then through WeTransfer, Braincore, just send it to me through WeTransfer, the higher res images, and then I just keep it on my cloud as well, in case something happens and those files. That is where the money lies. I mean, who knows, there might be other opportunities in the future. I find another site and I upload these images and somebody wants the copyright and want to do whatever, you know, I've got them. If you don't photograph your art, of course, well, then just carry on enjoying your hobby. That's a no, I'm joking. The equity, like I'm trying to say, really lies in that high-res image. You can do so much more with it. But if you don't photograph the art properly, once the client has bought that painting, if you go and approach that client and say, oh, I just want to borrow that painting to take a photo, they are not going to give it to you and they won't like that. You've got to make sure that you photograph that thing before it's hit that gallery wall. And sometimes that's very stressful. And, you know, the mission around deadlines and all of that, now you're still going to wait for the photographer to do their thing. Anyway, but it's all worth it. In our previous show, I encouraged all the students to make prints of the artwork. So at our annual exhibition, our community of artists can make up to 6 artworks each. I showed them how to do the print stock if they want to, and a lot of students did produce prints of their works, and we did sell a lot of the prints. Yeah, so it was either originals or prints, and the prints all had to be the same format. So that's very neat. You know, the clients can come in, they can see, 6,000, same image, 2,000 for the print. Let's rather take that. Sometimes if the print is more than the original, that's a bit of a problem. Let's go with Clary.
Yeah, I just want to know, in terms of increasing your prices, if
Yes.
you're selling consistently,
Yes.
what kind of increments would you be increasing annually?
That does depend. You got to obviously, if you've got to work in a gallery, you'd have to do it in consultation with the gallery. But I would say, yes, if you could push it to 10% a year, but that is pushing it. But that is consistent. If you can maintain that, of course, the investment potential of your art, and those who are interested in that, sounds very good to them. You know what I'm saying? But you've got to think about it. I mean, you've got to see if your work is already too high. You might need to just camp there for a bit and then put it up. So you'll know, once you can't keep up, and when I say can't keep up, I don't mean I've got 20 artworks out there, some are on shows and competitions and whatever. I don't mean that kind of, I actually mean sales. You can't keep up with replacing the work that's actually sold, yeah, that's a very good sign that your pricing should go up.
Just one other question. If you're selling at different places that take different kinds of commission,
Yeah,
how do you price your work?
the same.
That there's consistency.
The same. If my artwork is 10,000 Rand, irrespective of what anybody's commission or cost is, the artwork stays 10,000 Rand across the board. So not just because, okay, look, there are other things, like some galleries will compensate you for the framing of watercolors and sometimes paintings as well. That you work out with the gallery. But if I got that piece at this gallery that takes 30%, or let's say at this gallery that takes 50%, and then I put it on SASA that only takes 30%, it's got to be the same price. You can't drop that price because this commission's less. That's what I mean by consistency. You've got to keep your market value, you protect at all costs. As soon as you start, especially if you do that publicly, then you're going to go backwards. Who else?
Regarding the discounts, people always want to haggle when they buy art.
Yeah.
What would be a decent discount where the client would be happy, but you don't earn disrespect?
Good question, very good question.
The toffee apple of friends and family buying your art.
Friends and family, always want everything for free, I tell you. Anyway, okay, so from a gallery perspective, if I bought a new artist on, this is one of our contract points, discounts. So as a norm, we don't offer discounts. The price is a fair price. So I always tell clients, I don't care where they come from in the world, we work on a fair price system. But if I sense that they're serious about this artwork and that discount is going to make a difference between them actually buying it or not, so you've got to use a bit of discernment there. You don't just off the cuff tell them this artwork is negotiable. Goodness, that's the beginning of the end. So I would have already pre-arranged with the artist that we could offer 5% off the retail value, but never lower than 10%. So sometimes, some clients, they're going to push it to 10%. But if you start with 5% and not 2%, and I also, if the gallery is any good, even if you've agreed with them prior that they can go 5 or 10, the gallery still has to phone you in front of the client. So we would always say, let me just speak to the artist and see if they'll agree to a 5% drop. So that, otherwise, the client thinks, a lot of people have this idea that galleries just inflate the prices and everything is subjective and highly flexible. It's not. We've got a very specific relationship with the artist. We've already agreed on a fair price, and now you're wanting to disrupt that agreement. So I've got to respectfully contact the artist, and if they'll agree to 5%, or maybe 10% if they are very pushy. So that's kind of the best way to do it. If it's friends and family, my brother comes along and he's just got a way of getting things for free. They work all kinds of guilt maneuvering and what else. Anyway, if it's friends and family, again, you can give your stuff to whoever you want. It belongs to you. But if you're serious about your career as an artist, you've just got to say, if you give somebody a painting as a gift, you don't have to go make that public. It's a blessing to them that they received it. But if somebody hackles you down or like, oh, I love your art, but that 30,000 Rand painting, I only have 3,000 Rand. That's all I can afford. If you really want to give it to them, that's fine. But then you've got to ask them to just be discreet about it, not to go put it on Facebook, look what I got for 3 grand. Okay, does that answer that question? So it's your property, obviously, but a market value is very hard to establish actually, and especially for us creatives. We don't want to think about all this stuff, but you've got to protect it, you've got to work it slowly, and you'll see in a few years' time, people will accept what you're asking because it's been a steady growth and it's reasonable, justifiable. Anybody Googles your name, oh, that is the price point of the art. Oh, I see prints are that, originals are that, and so on. Good. Any further questions?
Are we ready for a cup of tea? Thank you very